Breaking the Paradox of Innovating for Good. I'm Teresa Spangler, and I'm excited to talk about this topic with you today and appreciate being invited to be able to speak on it. I'm very passionate about this idea of innovating for good, but I think we first must talk about the challenges which a lot of innovators face. And we'll talk first about influencing. This is a great book. If you've never read the book Influencer, it really highlights methodologies and challenges associated with influencing people to make changes all over the world. But I love this quote that I pulled out of the book, and it's by Will Rogers, an American. He was an American humorous actor and author. But he says there's three kinds of people in the world. Ones that learn by reading, a few of us that learn by observation, and then the rest like to pee on an electric fence to find out for ourselves. And I thought that was just very apropos to, as an innovator, things that we face when we're trying to convince people that something great could be had. There's so many challenges in the world, but there's so many enemies to innovation that we as innovators face every day. Start in the my right-hand corner, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The FUD factor, and fear is a personal fear. It's uncertainty about the environment, where things are going. Personal fears may be job loss. I may lose my job if we innovate in this way, or we're using AI to, replace things that I could do. The doubt, people have doubt about new innovations. Knowledge gaps are often an enemy of innovation. And how do we educate people on things that we're doing to help bring them along? There's certainly resource constraints, and then we all know regulatory requirements. If you're in the scientific field at all, or engineering, and there are so many grappling things. For example, we'll talk about 3D printed organs. Think about the regulatory issues that you face when you're trying to bring something to market like that. Certainly profitability and funding are always, they kind of go hand in hand. If I'm funding it, am I pulling from a bucket that may impact profitability of the company? How do we take all of these things, and sometimes they're all in one bucket, and we face many of them at one time. So let's talk a little bit through some of the methodologies or frameworks that we could use. First of all, this is also a very big issue a lot of times in companies that we have a need for speed to get things out the door. So I ask today that we stop and take a breath and really think about the responsibility of innovators and putting into forethought and slowing down to speed up. So it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. So when we look at ethics and we look at anticipated risks in cyber safety and privacy, many, many times these are afterthoughts. And we really need to be bringing these things into the forefront of discussion. You can already tell AI we're an afterthought of catching up to things that we know we need to put in place to protect people and people's privacy, or the data that's getting out there. How is it being used? And deep fakes, how are they being used to potentially in damaging ways as much as they could be in good ways? So putting all of these things in the forefront is really important, and it does require us to become friends with our finance side of the house, who's funding these things, to encourage that slow down to speed up, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about 6 barrier breaking tips that might help you through this, through some of these barriers. And of course, I'm always to make myself available to talk to anyone. If you'd like to reach out, my contact information will be in the back of the presentation. But first, let's talk about some of these tips and how we might use these tips to break down some of these barriers. So it's that to break the fast profit addiction, and it is to slow down to speed up, but that is encouraging you to take your finance side of the house and to work with them on a justification process that makes sense, so that you're enabling the discussions towards what it's going to take to get something out the door. So we're this fast, we need to reach, new revenue, or we need to reach new profitability, and this nice little new widget could do that. It's to ensure that they are in early the discussions as you're developing, you take into consideration those things that we talked about from ethics and privacy and data, and the things that we want to put in the forethought and planning and cyber safety, and encourage their efforts to work with you on why it's so important to take these things into consideration. By getting them engaged in the conversations and the rationale early on and together and building a plan together, you may have more success in being able to put all those things in the forefront and slow down to be more successful at the back end. The second thing is have each innovation. I mean, the company may have adopted a purpose, but maybe if it has or hasn't, your innovation can adopt a purpose. What gain, what social benefit gains would that innovation bring to the table? Really highlight that. That's how you engage people in your ideas. You're influencing them through this adoption of a purpose with the idea of what outcomes will social environments get. Is it an environmental? Is it a personal gain? Is it a corporate gain? Somewhere in there are deep purposes that the more you can bring that out in your story of this new innovation, the more you can engage people in those ideas, the more you start to break apart the barriers that we had up front, and some of the more challenging ones, for example, regulatory. We typically do, I'm not going to say typical, I know that's not a good thing to do, but it's in many cases, regulatory is an afterthought. We talk to them when things are almost ready, as opposed to getting them involved very, very early on, making them part of the collaboration and encouraging them to contribute to what that purpose could be would be very beneficial. The more they're involved early on, the more success you may have as you get through the pipeline and it's ready for commercialization, to have their buy-in and have what you need in order to have it approved. I guess this is a model that I love. This came out of Stanford Social Innovation Review, Chris Fabian and Robert Bowerkamp. This is a 4-model framework. One I interject here is that we ask the question, is innovation providing a social good? And that's just sort of a framework question to ask in any innovation. This gets us to innovating for good. If we understand each innovation or idea that we come to the table or product that we want to invent or move out to commercialization, what social good is it providing? But here's a framework of 4 elements that will encourage and help to design even more big thinking innovation, if you will. So innovation is humanistic is number 1. Really consider that you're solving big problems through human ingenuity and imagination and entrepreneurism that can come from anywhere. So involve humans in that. It's non-hierarchical. Drawing ideas from many different sources, including small agile teams to test and iterate with them and getting user feedback early on. And this is not pick 1 or 2. It may be that you're using all 4 of these. Innovation's participatory. You're designing with people, not for people. When you consider that element, you're designing with people, you're engaging more people that would be potential users or would have a stake in that innovation. And I think, the 4th, and certainly not least, is the innovation is sustainable. Building skills, even if most individual endeavors will ultimately fail in their social goals, is really important. Those skill building exercises will come back and you will iterate in new innovations. You'll continue to use these skills and grow your skills and grow the team's skills around new innovations that are coming out the door. So this is this 4 tangent framework that's very positive, that helps to put a social good and a social innovation for innovation effort together in using these 4 critical components. So that hopefully that will be helpful to you. And anything more that you might want to, let me go back to that one real quick. Anything more that you would like to learn about these models, because they give you really great examples. If you go to the Stanford Social Innovation Review magazine and look up these 2 individuals, they'll have articles and examples of how to use these for different quadrants that you see here. So we take, for an example, to change the question, and 3D printed organs is a really big one. It's been around for many years, but we don't see it adopted readily, if you will. If we change the question from what if, and it's like, what if we were able to print organs, to what will it take to print organs and get them out the door and usable in environments in healthcare and medical emergencies where they're really needed? What will it take is the question to ask. And if you, in a lesson learned here, one example that comes to note is that when you collaborate, as we mentioned earlier, with regulatory agencies in the earlier stages of development, make them a collaborative partner in that effort, you may have more success getting the regulatory buy-in and acceptance that you need and requirements met to be able to get it out the door sooner. In the case of, there's a documentary called They Say It Can't Be Done. It's a wonderful documentary. Patrick Ressner is the director of it. He brings to bear this 3D printed organs case study. It's very well done, but there were delays, even though they had the ability to do these things, they couldn't get it approved and into medical environments. So what they learned, and this is where I pull the story from, is to collaborate with the agencies early on would have helped them. So keep that in mind. And I think, again, it's important to change the question. We've been taught to ask what if, but then I think either ask what if and then what will it take, and follow up will help, because we can anticipate the things needed to get things out the door and who we need to be partnering with. And 5 is assign ambassadors of imagination, which I love this. We get boxed in many times into an innovation framework, and we forget to take the blinders off and really be thinking much bigger. And so here is, if we have a small team of ambassadors of imagination, they're simply tasked with big ideation. Let them go play. And it doesn't have to be 10 people or 20 people, it can be 2. But they bring this fresh perspective in and big ideas in. And maybe those big ideas are too big and meaty to do immediately, but maybe they impact an innovation in the pipeline. So how might this influence the kinds of innovation that you have currently? And how might it influence the pipeline to be bigger thinking in the future? So I think this is a really fun, engaging one, but I think it's one that you could also have a team of 2 or 3 people and then rotate them around, so everyone's getting an opportunity that works in the innovation team or with innovation to have these bigger ideas come to the table. And they can go out and play, they can go experience different things, but that is their task, is to imagine big. I guess the 6th one, and again, this is one that I think is really important, is optimism. So often innovation, it is innovation's friend to be optimist. Pessimism has a place in the world. It has a place in innovation. We want the possible challenges that something might have getting out the door. But if we make optimism our friend in innovation, if we engage optimism in the frameworks, we're having healthier debates. We're providing more critical thinking versus, the thinking that is, it can't be done. It's moving from, it can be done if we do these things. So what are those critical thinking elements that you could bring that turn it from negative to positive or more optimistic ways of thinking? It's a mindset shift. It's problem investigation versus problem stoppage, if you will, and this whole idea of collaborative ideation. So these are the 6 elements that can help us navigate through our barriers to innovation. And with that, I say thank you for allowing me to bring these up to you. This was a very quick topic discussion. I feel free to reach out to me. It's one of these that I've studied for quite some time, and happy to share, resources and thoughts that and the articles and things that I've found, and our own work and working with innovation teams around the world, and things that we have done to help kind of break down these barriers and to help move toward getting to commercial success on innovations. So with that, I say thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.